Bill Self's on a ridiculous streak at Kansas of making the tournament every year and being a top 4 seed every year. But when the precedent is cutting down nets and being 1 seeds, when you're a 4 seed, you lose 11 games, which is the most he's lost in his tenure there. 10-8 in the abysmal 10-8 in the Big 12. It's a down year for Kansas, and point to injuries at the end of the season to McCullough and Dickinson, and whether it was Arterio Morris off the court or Nick Timberlake just not panning out. The depth concerns were really strong, and depth has been a problem the last 2 years. But you look at Kansas this year, you bring back DeJuan Harris, KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson. You get 2 big portal ads in Rylan Griffin and AJ Storr, and you fill out the roster in a lot of other interesting ways. So Christian Nick here with Mike Vernon, the KU extra from KUHearings.com. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. So tell us, Nick and I were talking about how Bill Self was already looking forward to next year at the end of last year. And I guess the fallout of last season kind of going the way it did, considering how high the expectations are every year, and, a general outlook on how good this team can be.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for having me. It's great to be talking hoops. Thank God it's hoop season. We need this here at Kansas after a disappointing end to last year. And I was talking to someone recently that was breaking down film on KU last year. And he wrote me and was like, I don't think people realize how good of a job Bill Self did last year. And most people were kind of down on the coaching job last year. They just not that bad, but they were a 4 seed, like you said, unusual. And he was like, no, that might have been the best job he ever did at KU, which is insane. And I just think it, to show someone who's knows more about the game and really breaking down film is like, oh, they didn't have talent. The pieces didn't fit. And, like you said, a couple injuries, a couple guys underperformed, and it all kind of collapsed. So what's the fallout and what are we looking at now? The fallout is Bill Self went off on the transfer portal. They've got a good class coming in. He goes off on the portal, pretty much gets their top group of players, and they now have an absurdly deep team. You can see clear course correction as far as depth, going for more high major players generally, not entirely, but you can't rely on your Towson guard, your 6'4" Towson guard, even though they could shoot. It just might not work in the Big 12. It might not work with Bill Self. So, he wants physical players. He wants guys that are going to guard, and sure, you can shoot, but if you can't do the rest, it kind of all falls apart. So now they've got a stacked roster again, and I know that they think they're extremely talented, but the pieces have to fit still. And so that's kind of the stage where KU's at, where they can see the pieces. We'll see if they fit together and work to kind of make them as elite as they can be or should be on paper.
Yeah, I wanted to open up and talk about AJ Storr, but when you talk about Nick Timberlake, 6'4" from Towson, I mean, I can't help but think about Zeke Mayo.
Yeah.
Comes over from South Dakota State. Is that something that's in your head now? Is man, these low major guys, can they pan out because of how bad the Timberlake experience was last season? But I also on the flip that he did go get a stud from Wisconsin and Alabama and Griffin and Storr. So it's he's still pulling in high major guys, obviously. But what can we expect out of Zeke Mayo then?
No, that's exactly right. Where you look at Rylan Griffin started for Alabama, Final Four run. AJ Storr, Shaquille Moore started in the SEC a zillion games at Mississippi State. And so you're like, oh, I think most KU fans and the staff, I think, expected Ryan Griffin to start. It hasn't, and of course AJ Storr, but AJ Storr is going to start. It hasn't panned out that way. Zeke Mayo has really been the star through KU's offseason. This one's a little unique, though, where KU struggled again with Timberlake. Joe Yesufu is another example. He came in from Drake, never really got going as kind of the low major guy. Zeke Mayo is from Lawrence. It's a really unique deal. He knows Bill Self. They've known each other. The staff has known him for years and years. And he could have come last year, and I think was like, no, they didn't recruit me out of high school. I don't know. And now for this final year, he came in, and apparently early on, he was struggling a bit in their first runs this offseason and was trying to be a distributor. And this guy's been a 20-point per game scorer, I think, for multiple years at South Dakota State. Knowing Bill Self, it was almost like a reverse mind game, that he put on himself, where he was like, oh, Bill's going to want me to move the ball, pass, do all this other stuff. And I'd heard that Bill basically like took him aside and said, hey, be the guy. We recruited you. We know you to be this scorer. Like, be yourself. You don't have to do anything different. And apparently, once he got comfortable, it's been lights out. And he is a really high clip shooter coming off screens and on open shots, which he never had at South Dakota State. You're going to get a lot of that at KU, and they're really high on him. I expect him to start. He's been the best player all offseason, or since really that meeting, most of the offseason. So once Bill kind of said, hey, no, you can shoot, go be you, apparently it's turned things around. And he's been kind of the leader for the team too, coming back home. Like, it's this really unique story. So I've seen it not work out, but all signs are that they love him. He's been stepping into it. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I love that. Well, I knew Nick
wild.
was super high on Zeke Mayo, as you mentioned, from Lawrence. 3-year player at South Dakota State, averaged 19, 4, and 6 last year on 40% three-point shooting, 47% from the field, and goes and plays obviously a super tough matchup in the tournament against Iowa State, and 19 points, 4 or 6 from deep, like with being like the guy getting harassed and all those ball screens by himself. So really not – I knew he was super talented, but I kind of had him penciled into that 6-man role and thought he would separate from Shaquille and Coit. But it's really interesting. And I'm also a guy who loves – I was banging the Rylan Griffin drum the year Alabama was a 1 seed. I was like, this dude off the bench for Alabama is really good. Like, he's really smooth operator out there. And he obviously takes a step last year.
Asia.
But, he's still, I guess, here's the point I'm tying it into. Rylan Griffin's a great shooter, but he was a fairly limited role at Alabama. I don't want to say limited, but like he was like the 4th guy in the pecking order, right? Like he was behind Sears and even like Aaron Estrada and Nelson. Like he's kind of just really good in that specific role. And then AJ Storr obviously was a super high caliber scorer at Wisconsin, flashed at St. John's. But what I see in Storr and Griffin that is making me think about the fits at Kansas is Bill Self loves his wing stoppers. Yes, he wants offensive-minded small forwards in Jalen Wilson and Abaji, but like Christian Brown and Abaji, these guys guarded, and McCullough obviously guarded. So when I see Storr and Griffin, I'm wondering, yes, he's got these 6'6" athletic wings that can score, but are they going to guard? And that's why Zeke Mayo, starting at the 2 alongside Harris, could potentially makes sense, because you bring in Griffin off the bench, and that's just an insane amount of scoring punch to bring off the bench. So tell me how you see the defense panning out, and if that's kind of what you're reading.
No, that's a big question. Apparently, like, these guys can score. The offense last year, they struggled defensively and offensively. Offensive, like, I don't think they're worried about the offense. Let's start there. Zeke Mayo, he knows the staff. He knew the expectation. He kind of has gotten it a little bit earlier, right? There's going to be an adjustment period, but once he kind of got that green light, that trust was built early. Rylan Griffin wasn't really asked to guard, probably like he is now at KU. So the adjustment period has been longer. I think lately it's been coming around. Everyone says he can shoot, right? It's about what else can he do? Can you go get a loose ball? Can you guard? I know he wants to, but I just think it's a big system adjustment from Alabama. And so that one has taken a little longer. And AJ Storr, it's almost like not quite as extreme, but when Remy Martin came over from Arizona State, there was some headbutting, as far as like how hard you're going to go in practice. How hard are you going to guard and kind of wait till the end of the year? Like, that's not how KU really rolls. They believe in getting as high a seed as possible. Your chances are higher to go farther as a result. So like those December, January games really matter. And Self was pushing Remy Martin pretty hard to guard more. He didn't start him for a couple games early in the year. AJ Storr, I think, is having some similar moments right now where Self is pushing him to really do more than just go get a bucket. And they think he could be a really good like offensive rebounder. He's athletic. And yeah, when things break down, he can go score, which is great when you've got, a couple guys like DeJuan Harris or KJ Adams who aren't necessarily like bucket getters at the end of the shot clock. I think it is definitely unusual for Self to have a guy like AJ Storr if he's on the wing, like you said, like who's not really known for defense. So they've got to, we'll see how AJ does when the lights turn on. I'm really interested to see it. I think there could be, like, I wouldn't be shocked if I said 50-50 shot if AJ Storr comes off the bench for like the preseason exhibition game or something. Self tries to send him a message, but he's still their most like talented guy. He's the highest ceiling option they have, but I think there's also a pretty low floor if he's not going to be engaged or shut down if Self is getting pissed at him. So I really don't know, like KU's going to need good wing defense if you're going to have Hunter Dickinson back there who's getting it picked apart on ball screens a little bit, for example. Like they really need a guy like AJ Storr to step up, and same with Rylan Griffin. So are they going to take that step? It's really just I think a mental thing. And like, is that going to fuel their game, or is it going to be field goal attempts? It's got to come, at least for Rylan Griffin, like they've got to play defense. We'll see what happens with AJ Storr. I'm really interested.
I mean, AJ Storr definitely strikes me as like a game player more than a practice player. I mean, this is a guy, after all, who transferred every single year in high school and in college as well. He's transferred every single year.
Crazy.
I mean, I'm not trying to, that just can tell you a lot about the person because, at the end of the day, it's probably not the program. It's probably you. So he definitely has got to grow up. But I mean, I agree that like highly talented, like a great player. Like I like his game. I think he's going to work with Self. Like Self's a great coach that you trust. Let's talk about Hunter Dickinson. You just mentioned it. Like me and Chris love to talk about it. Like we like Dickinson, but man, like last year in the NCAA tournament, like Gonzaga Mark Few was like, all right, let's put this dude on a ball screen and let's just destroy them. And my God, they scored whatever they wanted that second half. It was ugly. But is that something the offseason that's been addressed? Like has Hunter Dickinson gone quicker laterally? Has he gotten any better? Or is he just who he is now? Like he's gonna be able to score on whoever, whenever, and like potentially, win player of the year? Like what can we expect out of him this year?
For the most part, like he is who he is. He's been around. That's why he's not in the NBA, right? He's at Kansas because of the quickness issue, like in a really big way, or just his mobility. And apparently, like, I think he works pretty freaking hard on his game. That's how he's so skilled. So I think he's tried to get better. I'm not sure it'll be substantially different. Where KU needs to like really improve is for the four other dudes on the court to know where to be and how to rotate, because look, Gonzaga was like nightmare matchup. The second I saw that, I'm like, oh, they're going to get pick and roll to death. And Gonzaga was really good at it. That's their offense. Now everyone else is going to copy that playing Kansas. So can the four guys playing alongside Dickinson rotate and be in the right spots? And like that is what you would hope they have addressed. I'm sure they are trying. And a big difference also, if if KU's just getting picked apart, they've got a 5-star, super athletic center behind Hunter Dickinson, Flory Badunga.
Yep.
And apparently this dude is really athletic. I think he's pretty raw with the ball, but he can play above the rim. And I would imagine he will be able to at least be an option for Key to throw at a defense if that's happening. Whereas last year they had Parker Brown, who transferred from Santa Clara, Christian Brown's brother. Like, this is a substantial upgrade behind Hunter Dickinson that is going to help, I think, just a ton. And it's a super talented roster around him that'll make a difference.
Right.
If you watch that Gonzaga game, they were out of position. They got to fix it. Everyone else beyond Hunter, because he is who he is.
Right. And it's like you couldn't afford to take him out because, like, at times, like, he was your only offense. Like, and this year you have guys like Store and, like you said, a 5-star backup who's freakishly athletic. Like, if he needs to come off the court, like, he can't afford to come off the court. So
yeah. I mean, look, it's not ideal, but the dude was playing 36, 37, 38 minutes a game. He was gassed too.
Yeah.
So hopefully it'll help keep him fresh throughout the year. Like, they have some other options, and I think it'll make a difference. But again, like, if you look at the tape, those guys were rotating slow behind him. They were in the wrong spot. They were playing just on their back heel. So I think they've been running a ton of pick and roll in practice, just practicing guarding it.
It felt like after that Houston game where they just got rocked that the season was over. Obviously not having McCullough out there you can't, even explain how big of a difference it was just from a leadership perspective, how good he was defensively. But I agree from what you said earlier in the call that Bill Self did a fantastic job, because at the beginning of the season, I kept thinking like, yo, Kansas is not like they beat UConn, which is a coaching masterclass, of course, and it was at home. But I'm thinking, Kansas is not good. Like, fade Kansas. But then when they started losing, I'm like, all right, they're still like very well coached. And this is still a team that was number 1 in the country in assist percentage, which is what I loved about them. And that's why Nick and I were both on them to beat Houston at home, because I was like, they're perfectly capable of breaking down this ball pressure because of having the versatile passing bigs of KJ and Dickinson, and then Furphy was hitting everything. But I still think this year, getting that experience, even if they don't play the same style, because they have guys that can get buckets at the end of the shot clock a bit if things break down. But the fact that they kind of got that style under their belt to take on teams like Houston, I would say, I think is going to be really important this year. But on the minutes thing, this is what I want to talk about. DeJuan Harris played huge minutes last year. You mentioned Dickinson playing huge minutes. Now you bring in a guy like Shaquille Moore, who, as you said, has started a ton of games in the SEC. He can be that backup point guard, right? So, I mean,
they love it.
Are those guys going to ever play side by side? And then you also bring in a guy, David Coit, who is a absolute sniper. Dude, he took the 3rd most threes in the country last year. Jack Golke from Oakland is one of the 2 dudes who shot more threes than him. So it's like, is Coit going to play at all? And I mean, Shaquille Moore is coming here. I know he knows he's the backup point guard, but like, he still is going to get his 20 minutes, you'd like to think. So tell me how you think the minutes will shake out there at the guard position. I don't even know if Zeke Mayo can play a little point guard. Do we average 4 assists a game? Like, do you expect there to be 2 point guards out there a lot of the time?
I mean, some of the best Bill Self offenses have been with 2 ball handlers on the floor together. If you look at, like, dating back to the Illinois team, but Frank Mason, Devontae Graham, 2008, they had that on their championship team. They had 3. They were rotating Russell Robinson, Sharon Collins, and Mario Chalmers. Like, but Darren Williams, D Brown at Illinois, like that. Those are kind of classic Bill Self teams, and he's got options at guard. So I expect, DeJuan Harris, of course, is going to be your starter. They love Shaquille Moore. They loved him. He got hurt. I think he had a foot fracture. He'll be coming back around the start of the year. But I do expect him to kind of be the 6th man. DeJuan Harris played way too many minutes last year. Like, they were asking so much of him. So hopefully that'll ease up the pressure. And also they brought in Shaquille Moore and Diggy Coit late. But part of the Shaquille Moore addition is because of what I was talking about earlier, Zeke Mayo in practice kind of being that distributor, and they went and got another ball handler to make things easier for Zeke. to basically be like, you're not going to don't worry about being point guard. So, yeah, he can handle the ball, but he is really going to primarily be at the 2 spot. Shaquille Moore will be your backup. I expect him to play a good bit. 18 probably sounds about right, 18, 20. But I think David Coit has been also better than I expected, at least. Like, apparently the dude can get buckets. Problem is, he's 5'8". I don't care what they list him at. I think he's like 5'8". Defensively, that's going to cause some issues in the Big 12, but on the days that they're struggling offensively, like to be able to throw, Shaquille Moore's a lot more like DeJuan Harris, distributor, really good defender. I think they will play together some. Crazy ball pressure. But then you've kind of got a one-man press break and David Coit, who apparently can launch, and you've got like your basically like in case of emergency break glass, we're going to throw a bunch of offense at someone. And they can do that with Coit and Zeke Mayo and Rylan Griffin and AJ Storr. And it's like, oh my God, that's so much shooting on the court at once. It's the exact opposite of what they had last year. So you can literally see them addressing their gaps, their issues from 1 year before. And they went deep, and they're never going to have to, they don't want to ever have to rely on, bench dudes that they don't trust again. And that's what they fixed, clearly.
Go ahead.
I think Shaquille Moore is just a know-your-role all-star. I don't know so much about Coit, but I think Shaquille Moore can come in, not give a crap about if he shoots once, but he'll guard anybody. And he'd look.
They
great.
really like him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's underrated. He's definitely an underrated pickup.
Create some
2
turnovers.
guys, KJ Adams, DeQuan Harris, those 2 guys. I mean, that's the core. That's the Kansas guys right there. What is their connection with Self like, and what does it mean for them to come back another season?
It's wild. Like, it can be frustrating with those 2 guys because they're just, you don't really have to guard them that much on the perimeter. I mean, honestly, Harris shoots at a good clip. He's just not going to shoot. He just won't take a bad shot.
Yeah.
Self-trust them. That's it. End of the day, it is explicit, like, trust winning loose balls, and like, Self thinks if you get 3 extra loose balls than the other team, you score on 2, that's 4 to 6 points. That can be the difference in a game. Like, that's pretty much the whole like system. It's that like loose ball math. Those guys both know how to do that. They can guard. They're in the right spot. And KJ Adams is really pretty damn athletic. He just can't shoot. But if they can turn him into a distributor who's a little more comfortable putting the ball on the floor too, I think they'll try to do that. It's really can create a matchup problem for other teams. Or you put him at the 5, and he's going to be way more athletic and faster than dudes at the 5 if you need to go small. So like, it's just an explicit trust thing. Self loves those guys. Those guys have a ton of respect for him. They know the system. And KU's been best over the years when you kind of have that established presence year over year over year. Sometimes it can take players a little while to get acclimated to playing for Self. He's a great coach, but he's going to push guys, and that trust matters a lot. And they have it in each other. And so it should be the engine that powers the whole thing. And it should be nice that the engine won't be completely worn down, which it was an issue in the past.
KJ is so fun, man. So underrated. Like you described it so well of the just the trust. And that trust transfers to me when I'm watching games. Is I have the ultimate faith in DeJuan and KJ's relationship with him, and like you just know with certain matchups that they're going to be approaching in like the best possible way. And my one note with KJ is like I love the experience he got playing small ball 5 a couple seasons ago, and like his passing is so good. Defensively, he's obviously the best defender. That's all great. My one thing with him is his free throw shooting is absolutely abysmal. Like I understand 61% isn't like the worst number seen, but man, I never think it's ever going to go in. I really hope that there was an improvement there. You know, I'm not asking you out of 3, just like it hurts my eyes watching him shoot free throws. And then DeJuan, you're right. He's been super efficient shooting the 3 ball the last 2 years, and he refuses to take it if it's not why. Even there were wide open ones that I wish he took. And I understand the offense is better this year, but there were times last year I'm like, come on, DeJuan, like you can score.
They need him.
We know you can. Like they needed him to. A couple quick hitters. Zach Clemens redshirted. I always thought he was sneaky. Okay, like, do you think he can also get some minutes at the big spot? And I guess the one position where there doesn't seem to be depth is that 4 spot with KJ Adams. Do you think there's anyone else who can be playing there? Could it be 2 bigs at once, or could a guy like Storr play the 4?
Yeah. Zach Clemens, I'll go to that one. I mean, like he has shown flashes. I just don't think it's going to be tough to play over the 5-star backup freshman. I think they'll compete early, but Flory will end up kind of getting the majority of those backup minutes. Still a really nice matchup option because he can stretch it at the 5. And of course, Hunter Dickinson getting most of those minutes. And then the about the 4 spot, it's really going to be important because I actually expect KJ Adams' minutes to go down a bit. Like, I think that's going to be best for KU to not have him on the court quite as much. Again, mostly because of the offensive issues. So I think AJ Storr, it's easier said than done. We'll see if Self can actually bring himself to do it. I think AJ Storr will probably get some minutes at the 4. That's exactly what I would expect. I think Flory, you could go 2 bigs again with the athletic Flory Badunga playing next to Hunter Dickinson. And we haven't talked about him yet. I mean, there's a guard or a wing really off the bench. Marquise Passmore. He's a freshman. He's from North Carolina. They are really high on him. Or he played in North Carolina, whatever. He's an athletic wing. I think he could also get some minutes at the 4 when they go small. His shot looks good. I think he still probably a year away, but it sounds like he is super talented. He was a pretty late riser in the rankings, like outside the top 100, ends up at 40. Like, this dude is on an upward trajectory, and I think he is there to play the kind of defense you would expect to see. So they're going to basically go small for the most part, when KJ Adams isn't there. You can throw an AJ Storr or a Marquise Passmore there. You can kind of slide everyone down, or you bring in a Flory Badunga type and just go 2 bigs when you need to. So they can kind of flex big or flex small, and that's what they'll probably do when KJ Adams isn't on the court. I expect a lot of AJ Storr, and then you can go Rylan Griffin, Zeke Mayo, and kind of settle up that logjam there.
Well, Kansas definitely has guys, and
so many guys
for the Kansas fans out there, and even just people who watched the Nick Timberlake thing. It was sad because he was really good at Towson. It just didn't work, and it was just like a close your eyes sometimes thing. It was just bad. And there's some stuff to figure out, whether it's Storr and Griffin becoming wing defenders that if that can happen. Like, as Nick said, Storr's bounced around a lot. Obviously got a huge bag to come there. Like, is there an ego thing to work out? But at the end of the day, it's Kansas. We know that they're going to be at the very worst, like a top 4 seed. But obviously, I think this is one of the best teams in the country with goals to cut down the net. So it'll be fun to watch it shake out. And I'm all aboard the Zeke Mayo hype train too. It's really cool hearing that. And it would be awesome to see him just come and be an absolute stud and potentially even be the second highest scorer on this team behind Dickinson. So, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be in touch this season. And I'm happy for you that basketball season's coming up. As
we need it. We need it bad. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.